Welcome to Alasquatch, the show all about Bigfoot in the great state of Alaska. I'm your host, Beans Baxter. So lace up your boots, zip up your coat, and come with me on an adventure as we explore all things cryptid in the last frontier. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to the 7th episode of Alasquatch. I'm really excited about this one. We're going to talk about one of my favorite Bigfoot books, which is all about Bigfoot in Alaska. It's called Raincoast Sasquatch by J. Robert Alley. I'm sure most of you have heard of this book if you don't own it outright. If you don't own it, I suggest you either see about renting it, checking it out at your local library or picking up a copy to own. I busted my copy out here the other day and started looking through it to prep for the show here, and I was really surprised. It was published in 2003, and I think that's going on about 16 or so years ago now. I didn't realize it was that old. For some reason, I was thinking it was published after 2010, and I don't know exactly when I got the book. I thought I got it not too long after it had been published, but I can't really remember. The book, if you're looking for it, it's available on Amazon. I'm sure it's probably available in some bookstores like Barnes & Noble. And let's talk about the book itself here for a second before we get into the subject matter. The subtitle is The Bigfoot Sasquatch Records of Southeast Alaska, Coastal British Columbia, and Northwest Washington from Puget Sound to Yakutat. And on the cover, there is a tribal mask of what I'm assuming is some tribe's version of Bigfoot or Sasquatch. The book actually has quite a few illustrations in it. There's a lot of drawings. Some are actually done by Mr. Alley himself. Some are done by another gentleman, and then there's some straight up just pictures. There's photographs of totems, totem poles, totem masks, tribal ceremonies where tribal members are dressed up as Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Wild Woman of the Woods, whatever, what have you. And just a lot. There's a lot in this book. I forgot actually how much there was in here. It's over 300 pages. And there's a lot of cool maps, and there's a good index in it. And I forgot about the maps. And remember last episode I was telling you guys, we're going to be going to Prince of Wales Island here pretty soon this year. And I had forgotten all about the maps in the book. And when I busted it out the other day and started going through it, and I saw the maps, and I saw the locations of the sightings and the stories in there, and I just got so excited. And I had to take a picture of the map with my phone, and I'm going to keep it for reference. And I'm going to go back through the book. I read it kind of quick and dirty just for this episode. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to read it again page by page and take my time in preparation for our trip to Prince William Sound this summer. So I'm really excited about that trip, especially now that I've kind of peeked in the book here and seen just how many stories and tales are coming out of that area, out of the Prince of Wales Island area. And I can't wait. So, that being said, I'm going to talk about some of my favorite stories in the book. Obviously, I think we're going to go through about 5 or 6 of them here, and that's not even a drop in the bucket, really, as to what all's in that book. And I'll kind of get into what's in the book other than accounts and stuff like that after we go through them. But there is a lot in this book, and there's a reason why it's a lot of people's favorite Bigfoot book. I think, was it Cliff Barackman was talking about it the other day. Somebody else was as well, like Derek Randalls or somebody I think was talking about it. It's just, it's on a lot of people's, if not their favorite Bigfoot book, it's in a lot of people's top 10 lists of favorite Bigfoot books. So I'm going to get into it, and we're going to talk about something. This is actually one of the stories that got me really excited. This is a sighting. It's a roadside crossing that happened on the Klawock-Hollis Highway, which when I get to Prince of Wales Island, I'm hoping to travel this road quite a bit. I'm thinking after I read some of the accounts here and the number of roadside crossings they have, I'm thinking I'm going to spend the night we're going to stay up kind of late, and we're just going to cruise the roads a little bit. hoping to have a sighting. So this encounter starts out: for anyone hoping to see a Sasquatch in Alaska from a vehicle at night, it seems the Klawock-Hollis Highway crossing the middle of Prince of Wales Island may be the best bet. It is from the middle stretch between Harris River and Klawock Lake that 2 independent reports were forwarded, relating to one 1993 highway incident involving Mr. I.W. and his wife, then a Klawock, Prince of Wales Island. So they both lived on the island when they had the sighting. Although I was not able to interview the witnesses in person, both secondhand accounts agreed in detail alleging the sighting to have taken place about 2:30 a.m. while the couple were driving home to Klawock from the ferry that arrives late at Hollis on the east coast of the island. They were driving over the middle of the island, somewhere near the junction of the main highway with Heidelberg Road in the south end of Klawock Lake, coming around a bend in the highway when they picked out a creature crossing the highway in front of them. The husband had apparently immediately exclaimed, "Look, a bear," to which his wife replied, "Yes, but look at that. Since when does a bear walk on his hind legs?" Both accounts agree. The witnesses stated it was tall, dark in color, and moved quickly. The middle of Prince of Wales Island is quite rugged at this location, densely forested with second-growth hemlock and cedar. This report is just 3 miles south of another sighting alleged to have taken place 2 years later, and one report of an unusual nest. So that account, it gets me really excited for my trip to Prince of Wales Island. I can't wait to drive on some of those roads late at night, and we'll probably have, hopefully we'll have somebody with me that can act as a spotter and have a thermal and a camera ready, and or vice versa. They can drive and I can act as a spotter, and hopefully something will happen. I just love tales of roadside crossings like that because they just, it gives me hope that maybe someday one's just going to walk out in front of the road in front of me. So that's just a small. There's several other roadside crossings that are detailed in the book, and there's even an interesting one that I didn't include, of one running across the road that was chasing after a deer. So there's a couple of stories in here that kind of support that Sasquatch is a predatory animal, and at least attempts to capture deer, assumingly to eat. I don't know what else they would be doing with them. So, there's some good stories in here, and I'm going to get to some more here. This is one of my favorite ones, and this is a tale of a Sasquatch on a boat. And after I read this to you, I kind of tell you why this story is kind of important to me. So this encounter happened in 1951 or 1952 when the reporting party was a boy. It happened somewhere off the coast of Prince of Wales Island. And the reporting party says, "I was working with my grandfather on our 36-foot fishing boat, the Verna May, somewhere on Prince of Wales Island. I don't remember the exact location, but I do remember us anchoring up close to shore one nice evening and going to bed. It was after midnight, and I had got up on deck as we had no facilities inside the cabin. As I flipped open the cabin door onto the deck, I felt the boat rock, and right in front of me in my flashlight beam was this tall, hair-covered, man-like creature climbing up over the side of the boat. It was all wet, and he was dark brown or black. As soon as he saw me, he just kicked off backwards into the water with a big splash. Granddad came up quickly and looked with me, but it wasn't swimming on the surface anywhere. Then, just a few seconds later, as we could see, this 7 or 8 foot creature stood up out of the shallows about 40 yards away. It stood up on 2 legs and walked straight up into the forest. It sure covered that distance underwater fast. Granddad saw it stand up too, and he got real scared. He pulled the anchor and started the engine right away, and we got out of there. We kept moving for a time until we got to another anchorage late that night. In almost 50 years on the water and in the bush, that was the only time I ever seen one of these things." So I really like that account, and I'll tell you kind of why that was in my mind recently. When we went to Port Chatham the second time, okay, so this would have been back, I believe it was last September, when we went to Port Chatham. Well, we had gotten a smaller boat to go on than we had the first time. Now, the first time we went, we had the Puckuck, which was this huge boat, and it had, staterooms, and it was almost like a house. You know, you had to go through doors to get to areas, and you know, it was the staterooms were down kind of, you know, you had to go down these stairs to get to them. So it was, you know, it was a pretty secure vessel. Well, when we went the second time, we didn't have the Puckuck. We had another boat that was a smaller boat, and it was used mainly for fishing charters. And it did have some bunks down below in the forward berth. But with us, you know, it was me, Stephen Major, Adam Davies, and I don't even remember how many people were in the film crew, like 4 or 5. I think there was 5 of them. So there just wasn't enough beds to go around. So I had volunteered to sleep out on the deck. Now, granted, it was a covered deck. It had like a canvas over it. I wasn't sleeping out in the open, but the back of the boat was completely open. The canvas was rolled up. It was just, you know, like a small, probably thigh-high gate that was between me and the water. And so I'm sleeping on a cot in a sleeping bag out on the back of this boat. And I'm laying there and I'm trying to get to sleep. And all I can think about is this story from Raincoast Sasquatch where the kid walks up on the deck and there's a Sasquatch trying to get on the boat. And I'm not going to say I lost sleep over it, but it was definitely on my mind as I was trying to sleep. And one night while we were out there, I was sleeping and there was an earthquake. And, you know, they say, and the captain of the boat actually argued with me over this. He woke up and he thought something hit us. He was like, what was that? And the first thing my mind went to, even though I had been thinking about the Sasquatch story, was it was an earthquake, because it kind of felt like everything shook. Like I could, you know, it was like everything around us shook. It wasn't like just the boat shook. And he said, no, you can't feel earthquakes in the water. So the next day, my wife had texted me on my Garmin InReach and was like, did you guys feel that earthquake? So I'm 100% positive that I felt an earthquake on a boat in the middle of Port Chatham. But the captain of the boat still argues that with me. So I don't know what it was, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't a Sasquatch because my wife felt it too. So anyway, that story was fresh on my mind as I'm laying on that cot outside that boat, just waiting to be drug off into the water and dragged up onto the shore like Albert Osman. But that didn't happen, so I'm here to relay this story to you from Raincoast Sasquatch. But it's one of my favorite, and there's a couple more in here too from Sasquatch interacting with boats. One of my favorite ones is the guy sitting at the galley table, and I can't remember if he's eating or he's doing some paperwork or something, and he's just kind of mindlessly, sitting there, and this hairy arm reaches in through the porthole and grabs his arm. It doesn't grab it forcefully. It just kind of reaches in and touches his arm and lifts it up. And I think in the book, Dr. Alley speculates that it had adapted to maybe look for food on the boats or something. I don't know. I actually almost think it's the opposite. I think that some of these creatures are so... human presence is so foreign to them that they're not really sure to be that frightened of them. And I think they're very curious. And I think it's more of an exploratory, like what's going on behavior, more than I'm going to reach my arm in here and hopefully grab, something to eat. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting point to ponder. But the next story that I want to read is, it actually ties in really well with that point I was just talking about how these things may not be used to people. So this one takes place pretty close to Juneau. So this story is relatively a more relatively recent one. It was in September 2001. It says a Juneau friend had just taken us on an evening hike up trail off the end of the gravel road west of town, and we had come back down. We were resting at a campfire near the foot of the trail, not far from our parked car. It was about 9:30 or 10 p.m. It was getting dark, and we heard a scuffling sound and footsteps coming out of the forest about 25 feet away. In the light of the fire, we looked up to see a black, hair-covered figure about 6.5 feet tall with very broad shoulders. It had one arm held up over its face as if to shield its eyes. It was edging close to us, peering at us. We called out, "Who are you? What do you want?" But it didn't answer, and we began to get really nervous as it edged closer. It was covered all over with black hair, and its eyes reflected with the firelight, all with a whitish, and then as it moved to the fire, we started to move away a reddish color. So I guess initially when they saw it, it had like a white eye shine, and then as it got closer to the fire, it looked red. We were standing about 15 feet away. I couldn't see his teeth, and his mouth wasn't open. And the whole time she keeps calling it a he made no sound at all. His body was more ape-like, hair all over, but his face was long and narrow, with ash gray colored skin showing. We were still shouting, "Who the heck are you?" and starting to back up. I was getting hysterical, and we all broke and ran for the car yelling. Running past the back of the car to get in, I noticed a huge handprint in the dust on the back window. We didn't look back and just pulled out and headed out down the road back into town. She said, I remember it had a bad smell to it, like a wet dog and garbage mixed. It was heavily built, but not threatening really. The total time he looked at us, it was about 10 to 15 seconds, I think. It scared us all. So that's an interesting account to me, because that to me, it didn't appear to be threatening or frightened. It wasn't threatening toward them, and it didn't seem frightened of them. So it almost makes me wonder, maybe this is the first time it had ever seen people. I don't know. It's just an interesting encounter. And she kept calling it he, and it makes me wonder, did she see genitals? Like, why did she call it a he? Is it just because it didn't have breasts? I don't know. But that's a really cool encounter, and it kind of goes with what I was saying about maybe these things aren't as acclimated to humans in that area of the country as we think they are. So that's a really cool story, and it's too bad that nobody there whipped out their cell phone and got a couple of pictures or some video. I would like to think that if I was in that situation, I would, but I mean, you never know. I have also failed to hit record on my FLIR when I probably should have. So who can say? Hindsight's 2020. Monday morning quarterbacks know best, but that's a pretty cool story. So this next one is the one I was just talking about with the arm that came in through the window. This happened in 1999. The reporting party is a Mr. Harold A. Says he's a Sitka commercial fisherman. So this is what Mr. Harold A. reported. And some of this is going to be a little repetitive because I just talked about it, but this is the actual account. We had our 52-foot seiner, then getting some use as a fish packer up at the south end of Cedar Pass, and it was late. We were just finishing anchor up for the night and about 100 yards from shore, and we were settled. My crew was below, tending to securing gear. I was alone in the cabin, resting at the galley table with the starboard porthole window open above my elbow, with the cabin light on as usual. It was dark outside. Just then, I felt something lift my right arm and looked up to see a huge hairy arm, bigger than a gorilla's, reaching through the porthole and lifting my arm. Its arm was covered with dark brown fur, and I could see the whole forearm up to near the elbow. The hand was palm up and huge, being about 3 times the size of a human hand. The skin was a dirty brownish gray color. The whole of the arm, except the palm side of the hand, was covered in a 4-inch dark brown or black hair. I could not tell if there was a thumb. I wasn't being squeezed or anything, just lifted up, and I would have to say it felt gentle. But I can tell you, I hollered and pulled my arm away. I didn't even look outside. I got the engine started and told the crew to pull anchor, and we moved north up the channel about 5 or 6 miles to a new spot before deciding that would be a better spot to anchor for the night. We didn't hear or see anything else. So that is the porthole encounter, as I like to call it, and that's an interesting encounter. It makes you wonder: was it trying to make contact with him? Was it just reaching in to see if it could grab some food? I mean, it was the galley. Maybe it smelled some food. He did say they were doing some fish packing or processing. So maybe it just smelled the fish and was trying to get on the boat to get some fish. I mean, who knows? It's speculation, but I can't really think of another reason why an animal would want to be on or around a vessel like that, unless it was probably for food. So, I mean, it's a great story, and I hope it's true. And if you notice the similarities like almost all of these accounts in Raincoast Sasquatch, pretty much the color of the creature is described as a really dark brown or a black. Mostly, I'd say black is probably the predominant color reported. And almost all of them report like a grayish skin color. So, those are the kind of things, all those patterns that you look for when you hear accounts like that. And all these little things just kind of click into place and line up. And, you hear them from people that don't know each other and have never heard of each other. And they're all telling stories describing almost the same thing. So it's really compelling to hear stuff like that. So here's an interesting one. This is probably, in my opinion, this is probably one of the creepiest ones in the book. This is reported by Dave and Alberta M. of Ketchikan. And it was, I believe it happened in December 2000. So I'm going to read this one and just keep in mind, try and put yourself in these people's shoes as you're hearing this. My wife and I were parked just off Revilla. I'm assuming that's Revilla. It could be pronounced like Rayvilla or something, but it's Revilla. Revilla Road, near the junction with the paved Ward Lake Road, just enjoying the music from the car radio. It was late, real dark, and we had the car running with the headlights shining on the snow in an open area beside the highway. The light was bright off the snow in a big arc to the left and right, and the snow reflected well enough that we could see anyone or anything were approaching on either side. We had the windows down, and it was real quiet. No other cars or noises around at all. Just then, I noticed a real rank odor, kind of like the smell of wet dog hair, and I looked around. Off to the left, slightly behind the car, and to the side, about 60 yards away, I noticed movement and could make out a large black form crawling just like a man on his belly. When I looked at it, it would stop. And when I would look back after a few seconds, it would be crawling and then stop again while I stared at it. It wasn't a bear, and I couldn't think what a person would be doing out there crawling belly down in the snow. I told Alberta to roll up the window. I didn't want whatever it was to come reaching up and grab her through the window. In the light reflecting off the snow, I could see what looked like a faint reddish-whitish reflection from its eyes, and the face appeared almost human. I put the car in gear and pulled away from it and headed back down the highway. The lights didn't swing in its direction again as we got going. It seemed big, about 7 feet if it were standing up. I would guess. I've heard all the stories about kustakas and that sort of thing, but I've never heard of them sneaking up on a car. But that's what it seemed to be doing. And that to me is pretty freaking creepy. What was that thing going to do when it got up onto the car? There's a lot of speculation that can be made on that story. Was it just curious? Did it just want to get up there and smell or touch the car? Did it know that there were people inside of it? Did it want the people? Did it know the windows were down? And so when I hear stuff like that, it makes me think of all the missing person cases in Alaska, and just kind of sends a little shiver down my spine. I don't really know what to make of that. I hope that story is not true, but but it probably is. Yeah. So let's move on. Let's do one more here. We're going to talk about this one. This is probably one of my favorite ones in the book, and I'll tell you why after I read it to you. All right, this is a story that was relayed by Thomas J. Fisher. It says he's an experienced Ketchikan commercial fishing skipper and hunter. So I believe this happened in 1985. So I'm going to read this one to you, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit. One evening in July, we had just anchored on the north end of Jacoby Island in Soapstone Bay, about 100 yards offshore, and we were just starting to eat supper. It was a beautiful evening, about 7 or 8, with a clear sky. My crewman and I were sitting on the deck watching a huge brown bear on the beach. A huge brown bear in the beach grass on the left side of the bay, about 100 yards away. It was big, its belly was above the tops of the grass, and I would estimate the bear would have squared about 13 feet if stood up. The bear didn't seem bothered by our boat or the Hoona Fish Packer boat near us at all. All of a sudden, we saw the bear's hair go up and it took off to the left, looking back like it was frightened by something over to the right on the beach. We couldn't figure out what had scared it. About 15 minutes later, we both noticed something tall and black moving on the beach about 300 yards to the right. It was shaped like a huge hair-covered man with long black hair all over it. It stopped in the tall grass to look at us. We watched it staring at us for about 15 seconds. The grass came up just to its knees. The crewman and I looked at each other, and we both said, "Are we looking at the same thing?" It seemed to be fully erect like a man, and we estimated its height to be about 9 feet. Then it took off running to the right in the opposite direction from the bear and covered about 100 yards faster than anybody on 2 legs I've ever seen. It definitely wasn't human, but it didn't look like an ape in its features. It ran just like a man, but faster, and it was heavier built. I've hunted bears, and there was no way this was a bear. The next day, we walked along through the tall grass all along the shore. It was all about 3 feet high. 2 good-sized black-tailed bucks we saw standing in the grass were covered by the grass to above their shoulders in height. It was clearly a Bigfoot we saw, and I don't worry about what people may say. What I've seen is good enough for me. So the reason that's one of my favorite stories is because it just kind of reminds me when I was on when we were in Port Chatham, and we were walking around, and it just seemed like one side of the area we were in was covered in berries, and there was no bear sign, no bear poop, nothing. And just a little ways over to the other side, there were no berries, and there was just bear poop everywhere. And it just made me think that maybe we had walked through some kind of a territorial barrier. And that story to me in Raincoast Sasquatch I just read, it always made me think that bears and Sasquatch while they probably occupy a lot of the same areas, they don't really cohabitate that much. They probably try to avoid each other when possible. I'm sure the odd encounter or dispute over food occurs every now and then, but I just think for the most part, they probably give each other a pretty wide berth. It just seems like any time I've been anywhere that was really super squatchy and there was a lot of squatch activity or squatch related activity or squatchish activity, that there wasn't a lot of bear sign and vice versa. If I saw a lot of bear sign or bear tracks, it seemed like I didn't really run into that much seemingly bear or Sasquatch activity. So it's just kind of a theory I have. I don't really have a whole lot of basis on it other than just some observations and that story. So, that's one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite. It's just because, after reading it, it kind of put that seed in my head, and then going out in the field and, seeing some areas that were completely devoid of bear sign, yet finding, human-like tracks and, full ripe berry bushes that haven't been touched, and then going, a little ways away and finding all kinds of bear scat and just completely, empty berry bushes. I don't know. It just makes me think that there's probably a pretty healthy territorial interaction between those two. They don't really. They kind of respect each other's territory. They don't get in each other's areas unless they absolutely have to, or they're really desperate. But like I said, it's all speculation. Nobody knows, but I think it would probably explain how two large animals like that could probably coexist in the same area at the same time. They'd probably have to have some pretty respected boundaries. But like I said, that's just a little theory I have. I can't really back it up. And getting back to the book, those were, what was that? That was like 6 stories I just told you. And there's a lot more than that in the book. Like I said, the book's over 300 pages. There is so much stuff in here. There are chapters and chapters on native legends and the different native beliefs. And there's even a really cool chart in the book that shows the names, the tribes, and the similarities. These natives believe in the Kushtaka, these natives believe in the Juneau, and these are, they both believe that it can talk, and, it's a really cool chart that shows the similarities and differences in the different native beliefs in these similar creatures. So that's a really cool part of the book. what else is in there? Man, there's a couple of chapters on some forensic evidence that was found. They talk about potential hairs that were found. There's some pretty cool stuff in there with some possible nests. And keep in mind, this was back in 2003. This was way before I think the Olympic project had even thought about there being nests or had went to investigate any type of nests. So Dr. Alley, I think he's a doctor. I keep calling him a doctor. I hope he is. It doesn't say that on his on the jacket of the book. Anyway, Mr. Alley, he was looking at nests back in before 2003 apparently. So he's got his finger on the pulse of this stuff. So anyway, I cannot recommend this book enough. If you're into Bigfoot, and even if you're not planning on coming to Alaska or that familiar with Alaska, it's definitely worth your money to pick up, just because of all the. I mean, it hits all the bases. There's witness accounts. There's speculation. Is it a relic hominid? Is it a species of ape? Is it something else? There's native beliefs are touched on, forensic evidence is touched on. It is just jam-packed with stuff. So that's one of the reasons why I cannot wait to get a hold of his new book. And honestly, I'm I'm a little worried because I build stuff up in my mind and it never meets my expectations. So I'm hoping that his new book is just as good as Raincoast Sasquatch, if not better. But I guess time will tell. Anyway, I really enjoyed talking about this book with you. I wish I could go through some more stuff with it, but I can't. I just can't. Like I said, the book's 300 and some pages, and I can't just sit here and read the whole book to you. I wish I could, but I can't. I don't have the time, and I would probably get sued. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion of the book and preview. I hope you enjoyed the stories I read. If you guys have read it and enjoyed it, let me know what your favorite accounts were or parts of the book. I'm really curious to hear some more takes on it. So anyway, this has been Alasquatch. You can email me at alasquatch@gmail.com. You can find me on the Alasquatch Facebook page. You can also check out the Kenai Bigfoot Research Group Facebook page, which is connected to the Alasquatch Facebook page pretty closely. You can also find me on Instagram at Kenai Bigfoot. You can find me on Twitter under Alasquatch, and also the Kenai Bigfoot Research Group has a Twitter. So give us a follow, give us a like, give us a rating and review, and keep your eyes open and tell us if you see anything squatchy.